Hello and welcome. I live in rural Kansas. This was some footage that I took just before we lost all the leaves on the trees and winter officially got here. So I thought I'd share. Lately, I have become obsessed with oil pastels. I have seen a few of my favorite artists on YouTube using them for color studies, and so I went and got myself some. So today's video is me just testing them out, doing some swatches and trying out different techniques. People seem to have a love-hate relationship with oil pastels, so I would love to know your thoughts below. If you find this video useful, I would appreciate a like and subscribe. I hope you enjoy. Last weekend I bought a couple of boxes of oil pastels. One is a Master's Touch and the other is Pentel. Pentel is relatively inexpensive. I think it was maybe $10. I went through and I made charts of each color so I'd have that as a record. And then I wanted to do a test swatch of different techniques. So I made a graph with blue painter's tape in my sketchbook. And on the two squares on the right, the top one is a wash with watercolor and the bottom one is an acrylic. It's not necessarily a wash, but it is pretty thin. Then I started doing just a light pressure with different colors in this upper left box. Just kind of play with the colors and see what they would do together. And then the one beneath it, I'm pressing down a lot harder and getting a more solid mark. You can't see it very well thanks to my hand. But eventually I get the entire box filled up solid, and you'll see it here when I get it completed. I haven't used pastels much, like I said, so this was a chance to just kind of play with it and see what effects I could get. The Master's Touch set that I bought was $20. It was half off that day. The Pentel you can pretty much find anywhere. They have them at Walmart and just about any art supply store. Here I'm doing some stippling, just making some little dots, and I'll use a yellow here also. You can't see the yellow very well on camera, unfortunately, but I do show you a close-up once I'm finished with that particular block. There's just so many different things that I'm finding you can use these for. This afternoon I used it for a portrait, and I was fairly happy with the results. Yesterday I did a small landscape. They're portable. They're just handy to have in your arsenal. Really, I've been kind of avoiding them, I feel like, for most of my life. So I really want to play with them in the next few months, just to see what they'll do. This was not my favorite technique. I think I preferred the blending and the maybe mixing it a little bit with some solvent, which I'll demonstrate up here as I work my way through these swatches. Let me speed this one up here so we can proceed on to the next swatch. The stippling tends to take quite a bit more time for myself than the others do. You saw me clean off the pastel there with a paper towel or tissue, which is an option if that's something that matters to you, because it'll pick up a lot of the color of the whatever's on the surface that you've used previously. This one I'm just doing some quick scrumbling or just scribbling, just getting the colors down onto the surface. It gives it an interesting visual texture. It's also just more expressive, more playful-like in my mind. And then on this next one here, I'm just going to get down a solid color, and as you can see, then I switched. This one is a blending swatch, which you'll see me using my finger there. You can also use a Q-tip, you can use a piece of tissue on your finger or on a tool, you can use makeup applicators, makeup sponges. You saw me use a paintbrush there. It's a really soft paintbrush to just kind of get some of the little loose specks that fall off of the oil pastel. And I just continue to work on that square for a little bit. There was that mighty paintbrush again. So on this one I'm doing an impasto, more of a thicker application, but I'm going to leave the brush strokes in there. They won't be blended together. And I really like this technique also. And I encourage you to get out your oil pastels and just play around, see what you can do with them, make marks, smear things around, scratch into it, see what different kind of textures you can get, how the colors work together, the actual pigment colors, and that way when you go to do an actual project, you've got this information to fall back on. Like I said, I'm fairly new to oil pastels as I'm doing this, and that was the whole purpose, was just to see what I could do with them so that when I started doing pieces, I had that information in my back pocket. This is me just kind of trying to clean up the edges of that one that was blended with objects. You saw me use a Q-tip there. I haven't had a lot of great luck with using a Q-tip. Even if I dipped it into solvent, it didn't give me any, it just kind of smushed it around. Maybe my Q-tip itself was too large around, but I didn't really care for it too much. Then this next one is a fun one. I'm laying down a solid red color here, and it would help too if I had smeared it with my finger or blended it some to get an even smoother surface there, a more solid surface. I started to use yellow, and yellow just wouldn't go over the red. So I went with a darker blue, even though it looks like a black here. When you're mixing the two colors together, it definitely gives you a very rich, dark color. But I put that blue on top of it, and then I smeared it around a little bit, as you can see. Then I took a sharp object and I started scraping in there. I didn't have anything handy. You can use an awl that has a very sharp point, and it gives you great control. But I had the scissors there, so I just grabbed them and used the tip of the scissors. And now you can see it a little bit more on the video. I'm doing some cross hatching. You just scrape off the blue and it will leave that red showing through from underneath. And it's kind of a neat effect. You can use this for hair, like flyaway hairs on portraits, or very fine lines on anything, say if you're doing lace or something similar in a still life. And then you can go over the area that you scraped away and change its color if you want to. That's another option. And speaking of scraping, you can also take a palette knife, as I'm doing here, and scrape off bits of your oil pastel and then mix them together on the surface. I chose to speed this up even faster in this section. This takes a little bit to do. It is an interesting effect, and the colors seem to mix a little bit differently than if I had just drawn with the oil pastel as I had done previously. It seemed to have a lot less control too of the way the marks looked, but that could just be a personal thing. And then I'm touching things up a little bit here, just kind of playing with it and seeing what it'll do. On this next one, I have a a small stencil that I made of a heart. I had used the other side of it, and there was red on it, which you could just see there. And it left a red outline on the stencil when I used it on this. I'm just trying to get a somewhat interesting design here. You can also use the edge of your paper as a stencil and get a nice crisp straight line instead of trying to do it freehand. And then this next one is more of a transfer. So I'm taking the oil pastel and just creating a solid area on one side of the paper and then putting it face down onto the blank area and then writing over it, and it will transfer the color that you've applied. This can work again for details. You could use this for grass, foliage. These last two swatches are probably my favorites. I've used a watercolor wash in this square that I'm in now, or this rectangle, and I'm just going over it with the oil pastel. Then I'm going to blend it with a paintbrush dipped in a little bit of solvent, a little bit of mineral spirits. This will help blend the colors together and create a smooth transition if you just want everything blended nice and neat. Or you can also use this technique for making paint strokes by using the oil pastel as an actual painting medium by sort of dissolving them a little bit with the solvent and then making positive strokes on the surface. This last rectangle was probably the most vibrant. I've taken a clear gesso and coated that rectangle and then painted over it with the red acrylic. The red is laid down in a very thin layer. It's not really a wash, but it's not a heavy layer. And then I'm going over it with the blue oil pastel. And then this is me just taking off the tape where I've masked off the edges for the swatches. It's just a removable painter's tape, an inexpensive roll that you can get at any discount store with painting supplies. And then at the very end, I would suggest that you spray the whole thing with a fixative. And I'll insert a picture here of my can of fixative spray that I use. It is considered to be toxic, so you do want to do it outside. You don't want to do it inside your home. It can have a really strong odor, so that's another thing to consider. And on my way out, I will give you a slow look at each one of the swatches that we created. I've been doing these in my sketchbook, and between the pages I'll put a piece of wax paper and then just tack it in with a little piece of the painter's tape. And in the comments below, let me know what your experiences have been with oil pastel. Is it something that you enjoy? Is it something that you've just sworn off and do not like at all? And with that, I will let you go, and I thank you for being here. I appreciate you more than you can know, and I hope to see you next time. Bye all.